So, let's talk about V. Gordon Childe. By day, one of the most famous archaeologists of the 20th century. But it turns out there was a whole other side to him. Newly declassified files reveal a secret life of immense mystery, one that was far more complex than anyone ever suspected.
And this right here, this really captures the central puzzle of his entire life. On one hand, you've got the public intellectual, right? The very first director of London's Institute of Archaeology. But on the other hand, you have this. A secret government file. It marks him as a person of interest, a man who is being watched by spies for pretty much his entire adult life.
Okay, so to really get this story, we actually have to start at the end. It's October 1957. After this incredible, celebrated career over in Britain, Childe heads back home to Australia. One day, he decides to go for a hike in the Blue Mountains, and he just never comes back.
So, the official story that you saw in the papers was that it was a tragic accident. They found his coat, neatly folded, his glasses, his compass, all right there near the edge of a cliff. And look, it was a plausible story. But the thing is, his closest friends and colleagues, they just weren't buying it. They'd seen him just days before, and he was cheerful, he was engaged. It didn't add up. Some even started whispering about, well, political assassination.
But here's the twist. The truth was already in the mail. See, Childe had sent a suicide note to his successor back in London, and it had these incredibly specific instructions. Do not open until 1968. I mean, think about that. It's just this stunning final act of secrecy from a man who had absolutely mastered the art of compartmentalizing his life.
Okay, so before we dive into why a guy like this was being watched, you really have to get just how big of a deal he was. We're not talking about some obscure professor in a dusty office. This man was a global superstar in the world of archaeology. Seriously. His output was just insane. Between 1923 and when he died, he wrote 517 articles, chapters, and reviews. 517, and get this, that number doesn't even count his 28 books. Some of those were translated into more languages than pretty much any other archaeology book out there. And just to put that into perspective for you, in 1936, Harvard was celebrating its 300th anniversary. They decided to invite the single most important person from every single field they taught. And for the entire field of prehistoric archaeology worldwide, who do you think they picked? Yep, V. Gordon Childe. That's the level we're talking about here. He was the guy. And here he is, looking every bit the part, right? The respected leader. He could be super friendly and outgoing with his students and colleagues. But even with all that fame, the man himself was still a total puzzle. He never married, was never seen in a public romance, and when he retired, he destroyed most of his personal letters. He basically just erased his own inner world on purpose.
So you've got this public genius on one side and this private enigma on the other. And then, decades later, these files get declassified. We're talking 2 thick folders tied up in rough twine detailing decades of secret government surveillance by MI5, Britain's security agency.
And this, of course, brings us to the big question. Why? I mean, what on earth could this world-famous professor have possibly done to deserve being spied on from the time he was 25 all the way up until the day he died? Well, the files, they have some pretty shocking answers. So, when you look at the files, it seems it all started with his politics when he was young. He was an outspoken pacifist during World War I, and he had socialist sympathies. And for the government, apparently, that was enough. What came next wasn't just them keeping a casual eye on him. No, this was a constant, invasive, 40-year-long operation. And the methods they used were, well, they were everything. They were listening in on phone calls where he was just mentioned. They were intercepting mail sent by him, mail sent to him, and even mail between 2 totally different people that just happened to mention his name. They had observers at events, they had informants inside his own university, and they looked at every single application he ever made for a passport or a visa. This was a daily, constant intrusion into his life. And the language they used inside these official government files, it's just jaw-dropping. In a letter between MI5 and one of his old Oxford professors, Childe is described as, well, repulsively ugly, probably the ugliest man in the world. I mean, come on, this wasn't some cold, dispassionate intelligence work. This was personal, and it was filled with just petty, ugly prejudice. And here's the really crucial part, how it escalated. Early on, a source at Oxford calls him harmless but disgusting. But MI5, they quickly ramped that up. They started labeling him a thoroughly perverted and probably a very dangerous person. And that assessment, that's what led to an official warrant to open every single piece of mail and every telegram sent to him. for decades.
But here's where the mystery gets even weirder. While MI5 in Britain was in a state of what the source material calls outright panic, their Australian counterparts, ASIO, were totally unimpressed. They basically said, "This guy, he's honest and loyal." When MI5 sent this urgent warning that he was a danger to this country, ASIO pretty much wrote back saying the most dangerous thing he'd ever do is write a pacifist article. This huge difference in how they saw him, that's right at the heart of this whole puzzle.
So to even try and understand this, you have to realize that Childe was what the files themselves call a man of parts. He was a master at living on multiple levels at the same time. He had this really unique kind of mischievous sense of humor, loved practical jokes, and he apparently got a real kick out of poking his conservative colleagues by making jokes about Comrade Stalin. And this photo just captures that other side of him perfectly. Here he is, leaning on one of his big, powerful cars that he loved, and he's holding a teddy bear that was a gift from his students. See, to them, he wasn't some dangerous subversive. He was just their warm, friendly Uncle Gordon. It's such a massive contrast to the sinister picture being painted in those secret government files.
So, the big question is, did he know he was being watched? And all the evidence points to a big yes. At one point, MI5 messed up an interception so badly, they ended up sending him a letter that had a very obvious filing punch hole in it. Now, this is a guy with a super keen eye for detail. He almost certainly knew his mail was being opened, and it looks like he decided to play some games with him.
Check this out. In 1955, MI5 gets a tip that Childe is flying to communist Romania. So they get all their people at the airport ready to watch him. The day comes, they wait, and he never shows up. They do some digging and find out he had actually left on a completely different flight several days earlier. He had probably bought 2 tickets, which is an expensive trick, but it let him slip right past his watchers without them having a clue. He wasn't just some passive subject. He was an active player in this little game of cat and mouse.
And all of this brings us right back to where we started, his death. After 40 years of nonstop intense surveillance, the files just go quiet during his last few months in Australia. It seems like he was, finally, alone.
Or was he? Because even after his death was ruled an accident and way before that suicide note ever became public, the world of spies was still whispering about him. And there's this one final cryptic note from the head of Australian intelligence that just blows the whole mystery wide open again. He asks if Childe's death was influenced by factors of counter-espionage significance. Just think about that phrase for a second. Counter-espionage. That implies actions taken against foreign spies. What exactly did the head of Australian intelligence suspect was going on? After 40 decades of files, maybe the biggest question isn't what the spies found out about Childe, but what role they might have played in his final tragic act. It's a question the files raise, but one they can never truly answer.